It's go time. So, Coach Helen for YouFit Studio, and I'm talking about digestion and emotions. Now, I mentioned this on the old, I think it's a fight or flight video actually. It's a pretty cool one. I had a lot of feedback on that one too. If you haven't listened / watched it, have a look. It's quite cool. And I said I would talk about the other side of the coin. I'm just distracted by the studio shouting blonde at me. You talk about temperament, well, the hair Clara should go. So talking about digestion and emotion and actually how closely they are impacted. Now, I talked about it in relation to the stress response. However, I was going to look at specifically one element, and it's just about, this is about the emotional connection between brain and gut, because it exists. One of the things I want to start by saying is that like a lot of things, I said this a couple of weeks ago, I think, there's some truth in a lot of the old sayings. I mean, I hate to let my mum know that she was right, because it really grates on me. However, she probably was. Because there's common truths in some of the sayings. When you say, like, when someone says they've got wrenching, or, oh, I feel I've got butterflies in my stomach. It's a very common saying, and yet it's actually very prominent and actually a descriptive sensation of something that's happening, that is actually happening. It's not a phantom thing, it's not a myth, it is actually happening, that your emotions have a impact on your gut and vice versa, right? So if you start to feel that, you never think in your head, I am nervous now, and then your gut goes, actually you get the butterflies and go, oh yeah, I'm feeling nervous, right? Likewise, if someone does get, I don't know, if they have a thought process that's based on an emotion, it will have a reaction with their stomach, right? One way or another. It's a two-way communication, I suppose is one way of looking at it. And it's sensitive to a lot of emotions, actually. We think about some common ones, like I said, stress response is one. However, you can think about anger, right? Anger has a reaction with gut, vice versa. Anxiety, sadness, happy, I mean, you're really happy or elated, still kind of works. You still get triggers that all trigger a reaction between the gut and brain communication. It said it's like a two-way communication. Now, here's something. I think I said this before. I said a lot before. Okay. I think I said it to a client actually last week, because we're talking about digestion, and I said that, and Heather will know about this one, because it's a common question we ask as coaches, or certainly to challenge each other on stuff. But it's like, okay, and I said to the client, I said, okay, where do you think digestion starts? And she said, it starts in the stomach. I was like, digestion starts in your brain. Dun, dun, dun. Dun. Digestion starts in your brain. So actually what happens is, if you think about it, if I use an example, because my one, it happened yesterday when I was at the Towers of Alton. I didn't cave, FYI, thought about it. My go-to smell since forever is fresh donuts. Not like donuts from Asda, because I'm like, yeah, no. I mean fairground donuts. Do you know which ones I mean? Where it's like you can smell them from so many moons away, and you just can't work out where they are until you get closer. And I think it reminds me of being at fairs as a kid, and I really loved that, because I like lots of flashing lights and things, sensory overload. That's why I love Alton so much. And that goes for me, is the smell of candy floss and the smell of, yes, he knows this, yes, donuts! It's a smell, right, that I don't even know. Like, it doesn't what situation I'm in. I think that's why I like churros so much, just why I avoid them like the plague, because it's a similar smell. The smell of fresh donuts is like manna from heaven. I mean, if anybody, God, I hope not, if anybody actually bottled that stuff and made a perfume of it, I think cannibalism would be my next step, because I would literally be because that's how strong it is for me. Now, I might have just ate a full meal and then come to that smell, and still I'd be like, oh, I'm there, I can do that. It took a lot yesterday, a small fact, true fact, don't give out maps anymore. So you're kind of reliant on the sense of direction, of which I have none. So imagine how many times I went back and forth past that stand. It was more than once. Actually, I think it was like 5 times. And I go past the queue, look at the people in the queue going, look at them queuing for donuts. Look at them queuing for donuts. Oh. Now, if I hadn't smelt the donuts, right? I wouldn't have, no, I'll go along my merry way. I'll be queuing at Nemesis, getting all my bruises, or waiting on Oblivion, or listening to smiling music, going slightly insane. Still listening to that 10 o'clock at last night in my head. The thing is that what happened was, and what happens if you smell things like fresh bread, or, you know, say you should sell a house by baking cookies. I've tried that, it works. It's the smell. So the smell, for me, and for anybody, and the thought process of it, the thought, right, the smell, and then the thought, because the brain interprets the smell, instigates digestion. Immediately, I'll be like, doesn't matter if I'm just there, I'm always going to be hungry as soon as I smell donuts. I'm like, grandma, grandma, grandma. Hina, imagine, right, I'm setting the scene for Hina, which is probably going to kick her off. Hina, you've just had a fully banging 3-course meal, and then and then someone melts some chocolate in your general vicinity, your favourite chocolate, I don't know if it's milk or dark, and just waft gently the smell of melted chocolate in your direction. I mean, I'm guessing it wouldn't take much. And that's what happens between the brain and the gut. It's a very simplistic explanation, and yet, like, we've all experienced it without realising. Actually, digestion starts in the brain because your brain registers something that you want. It's not your stomach going, do you know what, I'm just sat here with, oh my god, I've just killed myself because now I've talked about donuts. Now I'm like, I should have not used my own example. Help me. Yeah, see, Hina's saying, if I did that, she's got to have it, right? Because you're just there, you've got to have it. I think I'm talking about donuts too much now. I'm like this. Managed yesterday, though, did not give in. Now, the point I'm trying to make, without thinking about donuts too much, is that's how it works. Your digestion is kicked off by a thought process that for some is smell and some is actually just thought. Because if I was there without the smell and sometimes you'd want some donuts, I probably wouldn't react to it. Likewise, though, if we, as we saw when I talked protein and lost my mind, just talking about meat, then even the thought of it is enough for digestion or the hunger cues to start to flare, and that's your stomach responding to your brain, right? So it's there, it's a real thing. So that's an example of where digestion starts. How does it work in terms of when it comes to emotions? So the reverse, or another way of looking at it, is if you've ever sweaty palm thinking about it, you've ever had to give a presentation, how do you feel beforehand? I mean, personally, I'm a little bit nauseous. I can put myself in the thought process now, right? I'm doing this live, I'm like this. God, I'm so responsive to my own emotions in my gut. And if I want to make myself nauseous, I'll think of, oh, I would do this on camera. This is great, why I do this to myself. For you guys. If I want to feel my stomach get butterflies, I'm going to picture myself in front of a room full of people, someone cringing already, or discussing a topic that I've not really, researched or have any idea on, and I'm sweaty palms, with technology like a slide system that I have no idea how to use. Yeah, my stomach's not happy right now. I'm feeling quite nauseous, right, because of the thought process that I'm giving to my stomach. So again, I've gone dry in the mouth. Look, I'm like the best example, and yet that's how sensitive it can be when it comes to gut and emotion. It's a very sensitive connection between the two. It's just sometimes we don't recognise how these things can come into. I know Heather's like this. I've just thought about it. I'm dying. If you're dying about the presentation, or because you're thinking about food, Heather, because you're thinking I just want some food. But that is how sensitive that connection can be. That just a thought process. And what did I say? Thoughts, right? Thoughts create emotions, create behaviours or outcomes, right? And your digestive system is no different. Your thought process will impact your emotions and therefore how your digestion works. Now, I know that, and I've talked about this before, you can't think yourself happy, right? You can't. However, there are some physical and emotional things you can do to help become aware of this. Now, some signs, by the way, that this is something that is having a higher impact. I mean, I can joke about the donut situation and everything else. Actually, if a client comes to us and they've been in a high stress state for, I don't know, we're not talking weeks, we're talking years. Imagine what's happening to their digestion and their stress levels. Actually, if you were in a permanent state of, I mean, I'm talking about things that are like uncomfortable or anxiety or hunger. take something that's actually high stress, like the presentation situation. I know that's happening constantly, right? So when I talked about fight or flight, how much pressure that puts on other parts of the body, the digestion system is no different, right? So if you're permanently in that stress state, your stomach's permanently trying to go, what the f are you doing to me? Like, am I doing something? Am I not? What's happening? What emotion am I trying to respond to here? Now there is lots of different ways of approaching it. The signs that it needs to be addressed though is, and I used this example before of a previous client who diagnosed with IBS because this has been going on for a number of years. And actually, irritable bowel syndrome is very often, as I said before, yes, it's diagnosed. However, for this individual, it was a work-related stress where the response would come as soon as an email came in from an individual person, because there's a high stress response to it. And actually their digestive system responded to it as fast as they were getting the email. It just took a long time for that connection to be made between the two things. So actually, from a serious point of view, there's lots of reasons why it's imperative to actually ensure that your gut health and your emotions and your gut communication you're aware of them firstly. And also small and subtle things to do. Like even with that particular client, right? Honest to God, the simple solution for that individual was to do some stress management skills and actually turn off notifications on emails and only choose to look at emails of which they designated the time to be prepared for it emotionally, from a stress response and actually from a gut response as well, that it didn't impact them immediately having to go to the toilet because of a stress response to an email from an individual. Right, that's a stress response way of organising that thing. So there's some stress management things with specific things that can flare off emotion and gut responses. If you're looking at other ways of approaching it, which we've used at youth over the years, you do things like, if you're talking physically, I'm always going to advocate slow eating. Now, lots of you will go to a response going, oh yeah, I know that one, I've done that as a client, that's to help digestion, yeah, it's to help break down food, so your gut's not trying to do as much work, yeah, I understand that. Yeah, that's true. Actually, though, in this situation, let's take someone that's in a high stress state and has been for a number of years. It's unlikely that they take time to sit and partake in all 3 meals of the day. They may not even have breakfast, they may have lunch at their desk, and they're probably not fully engaged with dinner in the evening because they're still thinking about emails, or they're just in a rush to get the day done. So they're not really engaged in the activity of eating itself. So actually, when we talk about slow eating with a client who may be struggling with their gut-brain connection and what's happening, it's more about saying, right, okay, let's set aside some time a day where you're undistracted, where you're engaging with the process of eating. If it's only 1 meal a day, if that's all someone can manage because of whatever's happening from a stress response, right, then that's what it is. However, if I say to a client, right, your phone goes away, the TV is not on, you're engaging with somebody who's talking to you and you're taking 20 minutes, what I'm really saying to that individual is take 20 minutes out of the stress of the day where you're undistracted, where nobody could contact you to trigger a stress response with your stomach, so you can eat your meal, and take 20 minutes of the day, every day, as a first habit, to learn how to give yourself some time to help yourself relax. Now, if that individual can give me 1 meal and then 2 meals, that's 40 minutes a day. That individual is stepping away from outside pressures and stress. No social media, no email, text, WhatsApp, TVs, anything news related. That's 40 minutes a day where that individual is then stepping away from the triggers of their stomach, if it's not helping them at that point in time, that they didn't have before. Now, 40 minutes a day, 7 days a week. That's a lot of time if they've gone for years without actually giving their emotions or their thought processes a break from everyday stresses that's, causing issues with their stomach. Now, will I, as a coach, when I start with them, say that's necessarily the route? I may or may not. I'll probably say let's start with 20 minutes slow eating to help with your overall health goals, and then see what the outcome is, because I'll already have a good gauge of from talking to that client from the first contact to know what their pressures and stresses might be and why they're in the situation they're in. And so actually, a client will come back and say, do you know what, actually, I've noticed my digestion is a lot better all of a sudden. Like, yeah, IBS is really reduced down. Now, I haven't fundamentally changed something that's irritating their bowel. What I'm doing is giving them the time to actually relax and de-stress from their day and allow the emotion and brain connection to quiet down for a bit, which is massively beneficial. And the time to yourself element is huge, right? So next point, if you're talking about from a stress point of view, I said earlier, you can't think yourself happy, right? Be happy, be happy. However, on a previous live, I did talk about the happiness buffet, right? And how if we choose to, with a thought process, we can choose to either sit there and give ourselves thoughts where we're like really hungry. I can make myself angry. I can think about not having the donuts. That would make me frustrated. I can think myself into emotion, right? I can think myself frustrated about not having the donuts. Not talk about donuts again. I said I wouldn't. However, I could be frustrated and angry if I think about the most angry and frustrating thing. I can bring myself into emotion of anger. And yet so often we don't say, right, what can I do to bring myself thoughts of happiness? And that's the thing, it's what can I do? So if you say to a client, right, from an emotional point of view, I could say meditation, because yes, I talked about that in the previous live, talking about fight or flight. Yes, breathing will calm down your system. It can bring down the stress responses. Yes, it's not the only thing you can do though, because it only works in the moment to bring in, again, habitual things that create the emotion of happiness, is to do things, take action on things that bring those thoughts. So, oh, this makes me happy. What is this? Right? So take 2 prongs and say to a client, right, take 40 minutes a day to eat slowly. And also once a week, take 30 minutes to write a list of things that for you, not reliant on someone else or anybody else, or how they feel about something, that creates happiness within you. And give yourself 30 minutes a day. Combine those elements, and somebody who's having a lot of stress responses with their digestion, suddenly you can turn it around quite quickly. The only thing is, so often in life, as I said, if you've been doing it for a long time, you accept that this is how my gut is meant to respond. This is how my gut is. This is how I'm meant to have that response. When in reality, that's not the truth. So it's just dependent on how aware you are of it. And also what you're willing to do, like to do the work and actually sit there and think about all the things that do make you create that feeling of happiness. It's not always easy to do, right? That's why the body is such a fascinating creature, right? We use it and abuse it, right, to a certain degree. And yet it's a very complex and sensitive system that is fighting to always find balance, right? But the digestive system of the brain is always communicating one way or another to say, what am I meant to be doing? What's happening right now? And when we think about emotions and how it relates to each other, it's really interesting to see how you can fool your body almost into doing what it needs to do. Because the upshot of, if you are having these troubles, the upshot of not having a look at them is that consider how likely it is that somebody can absorb the nutrition that they need when the digestive system doesn't know what it's doing. I talked the other day that in fight or flight, you might have to start to slow down completely and not poo for 2 days. I mean, there's still an emotional response that's happening between the gut and the brain. It goes one way or the other, right? I talked about the client who gets the email. There's equally another client who will stop going, right? It'd be 2 or 3 days and like, I am so uncomfortable. And yet some of these hints and tips, there's other stuff. There's lots of other things we interplay. And there's always on the individual, right? So always take into account any kind of medical advice they've given. And likewise, again, we always refer them to somebody if it's not within our remit. The majority of this stuff is kind of habits that can be built into somebody's life that is essentially aiding slow eating, right? So allowing somebody the time, and also from a psychological point of view, giving them that time mentally. So it works. So is recapping. You did time this by about 3 minutes talking about donuts, FYI. Okay, so I said there's some truth in the common sayings, right? If something is gut-wrenching, or I had butterflies. See, when you might meet someone and get butterflies, elated, right? You go, you can get it for nerves, or you can get them because you're like, oh, hey. That's exactly what I do. So there's some truth and some common sayings about it, right? Our gut is really sensitive to our emotions, and how we think about things. So a lot of those emotions, it's not just one or two, it can be loads of them to trigger. So anger, anxiety, sadness, right? How often do people say, I'm really sad, I've been off my food, or I've been sad, I've had a lot of food. All of it, right? Being happy, or elated, I should say, really, most of the time has that. I talked about how it's so important to understand that when it comes to these things, that digestion starts even in the brain, right? How we respond to everything is in a thought process. Your brain recognizes everything and communicates, and it's a two-way communication street, right? You don't think yourself butterflies, you feel it, and then your brain goes, oh, I'm nervous, something's happening in my tummy. And likewise, you can think yourself nervous about doing a presentation and feel, oh, nauseous, like I did live and made Heather do at the other end of the internet. She's like this, oh my God. And that's always a good thing to remember, right? Those things happen for a reason. So if they're happening really commonly, though, and they're happening for a long time, and there's always health consequences for somebody, as in they're not feeling too great, or essentially if you're in a high stress state all the time, right, when I talked about fight or flight, it has the same outcome. You're never in a good space from a health perspective. So thinking about things like slow eating, where it's about digestion, as I said, it's also about giving yourself the space and time to eat. Eat mindfully, I guess is a client saying, and yet it's not always about eat mindfully to not eat as much. It's actually eating mindfully to engage in the actual meal, the time that's set aside to eat, rather than get it down as soon as possible, like an anaconda, and just get it down without chewing, to get onto something you're meant to be doing, because actually you're on your phone the whole time, or the TV's on, for example. You're not really engaging in the process, and it's not time set apart from the actual things that are causing the thought process that's causing the problems with digestion or with your emotional health of your gut, if you like. So yeah, setting time for yourself, and also from a stress management point of view, meditation is always preferential, yes. However, long term, you still want to look and think about things that create the emotion of happiness. If all these things create emotions that kind of struggle with your gut, the thing is to balance it out with something that soothes it, that creates the emotion of happiness through thinking, right? Again, thoughts, thinking about things that create that emotion for you, so that you calm the system down and enjoy parts of your life rather than always running between gut and brain, right? Kate's saying, oh my God, it makes sense now. I had IBS the whole time I was a trucker. Do you have it now though, Kate? That's the thing. The thing is, high stress jobs always instigate, there's a lot of things, well, high stress jobs, generally speaking, clients will come to us and say they have IBS, which is, it's not like untrue. It's just what's happening is there's a constant kind of flare up. So that client with the email, right? Same situation, was told it is. Now, he doesn't currently. We put small habits in place for that individual. As I said, it was a stress management tool. There was ring fencing communication, right? It's such a small thing. Yeah, how often actually, if you think about it, whoever you are, whatever you do, is living, you leave your emails and your notifications on full steam ahead all day, all night, 24/7, 7 days a week. I know I had one particular client who's like, I have learned to turn off my emails during lockdown. Rightly so. How many of us get an email and go, it's going around time, when you're not actually on work hours, and yet your response is, there's no stronger understanding between the thought and the brain, the gut emotions, when you get a communication like that and you have a response. So small, as I said, small habits of, for example, if we are, because we are in a world like that happens, it's ring fencing that time, taking off notifications, choosing a time to consciously look at your emails. If it's that urgent, somebody will email you, then you call you, right? If it's that urgent, we perceive every email notification is urgent. We look at it immediately. Our gut responds, we go, quick, look at it. Actually, though, as I said, there's modern day solutions to modern day stresses. It's just acknowledging that they need to be put in place to give a benefit to somebody, and that's what essentially the coaches are here for, right? We're here to identify those things for you and tell you what you can do to put things in place. For example, that's one of many things that people can do as part of the coaching process. Unfortunately, I suppose unfortunately we know it because we've worked with clients before with it. That's, as I said, that's part of modern life. So yeah. So yeah, Kate's all right now, right? It's always a good solution. Give up the job that makes you feel terrible. It's not far on. If it was ever changed career and felt a hell of a lot less all of a sudden with their digestion, not a coincidence. So tomorrow. Oh, tomorrow. Are your goals small enough? Aha! Looking forward to that one. That one is already in plan. So yes, join me tomorrow again at 5 p.m. and we'll go through that one. In the meantime, have a lovely evening and I will catch you tomorrow.